Good afternoon. We're here to dissect a grasshopper. This is a formidable looking creature, quite large. This is a lubber grasshopper, and I'll just go through the external morphology first, and then we'll crack him open and see what he's like on the inside. So each of you guys should be working in groups of 2 or 3, and make sure everybody in your group has identified all of the outside parts before going onto the inside. And with the grasshopper, most of the inside stuff is pretty difficult to figure out. So you're going to want to make sure you can identify everything on the outside before you move on. Okay? Sounds good. Okay, we'll start with the synapomorphies of insecta. What do we got? We got 3 body segments. We got here, the head right here, and then you have a nice line right here that marks the head from the thorax. The thorax is going to extend back to the abdomen, and the abdomen is going to begin right here. So abdomen. So we have 3 tagmata: head, thorax, and then abdomen. The thorax is especially interesting because it's got 3 components to it. It's going to have a prothorax, which is this hard protective shell that's going to extend backwards. So we have the prothorax right here, almost like a carapace of the crustaceans. And then in the middle, you're going to have a mesothorax right in here, and then a metathorax right here. And so there's 3 sections to the thorax, and there's also 3 legs. And each leg articulates with a different segment of the thorax. So the foreleg articulates with the prothorax, the mid-leg articulates with the mesothorax, and then the hind leg articulates with the metathorax. The meso and metathorax also have, attaching to them, pairs of wings. The wings are not true appendages, they're actually extensions of the cuticle. And the mesothorax contains the forewings, which are this hard, leathery protective layer. And then the metathorax has coming off of them the hind wings, which are membranous. Let me see if I can get them extended. And they can actually be used for flight. So most of us think about grasshoppers as jumping to escape predators, but they can actually fly quite well. And here you can see a very flashy membranous hind wing that they use for flying. And part of the reason it's so brightly colored is it kind of shocks predators. So you get a nice flash of color, and it distracts predators long enough for the grasshopper to get away. Pretty interesting. So 4 wings, leathery, and they attach at the mesothorax. Hind wings membranous for flying, colored to surprise predators, and attach at the metathorax. At the back, to tell male from female is pretty easy. This one is a male, and you don't see anything really sticking out here. It's all just kind of a blunt tip. On females, unfortunately I don't have a female specimen with me. All 25 specimens in my bucket were males, but your book has a nice illustration of male versus female differences, and the females are going to have an elongated ovipositor coming out here. And the ovipositor is used to deposit eggs deep underground. So they'll bend their abdomen into the ground, lay a bunch of eggs in this egg case, and that's how they lay eggs. So let's talk about the head. The head is a very important place if you are an insect. We have antennae, we have compound eyes, and then the face area is going to be a little complicated, so we're going to save it for a little bit later actually. So instead, I think I've gotten just about everything. I need to point out the leg morphology, the head morphology, and then I want to point out this tympanum. So if you look right at locate the hind leg right here. Right at the base of the hind leg is this little circle, this little tan circle. And in real life you can see it's kind of a taut membrane. And that little taut membrane is the tympanum. The tympanum is a sensory organ for detecting sound. So, ooh, a little squishy, delicious. This right here is the tympanum for detecting sound. Grasshoppers, that's particularly important, right? Because they chirp to find mates. So with, actually you can tell this little hind leg is full of, try to get this in focus, full of spikes. You can see the spikes. Those are scraped across the leathery forewings to produce a chirp. And if you get it just right, you can mimic it, but it's pretty hard to do. Usually these chirpings are species specific, so it's just these little stridulatory spikes on the hind legs that they creak over their leathery forewings, and you get a nice chirp if you do it just right. I'm not a very good grasshopper though, so. Okay, I've turned my macro lens on and extracted a leg from the grasshopper. This is the hind leg. You can see it's got a nice thick muscle for jumping in the femur, and really their morphology is just like the names are homologous to humans. So we're going to have a femur, and then we're going to have a tibia, and it's on the tibia that you're going to see the stridulatory spikes, and then you're going to have tarses. And the tarsals are going to have, there's many tarsals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the tarsi are going to have tarsal pads that are going to be used for sticking and gripping to surfaces. At the end of the foot, if I can get this in focus, you're going to see a tarsal claw, and there's a little pad in between the tarsal claw called the pulvillus. So make sure you can see that that one's actually not the best example. This one's better. Look at this guy. So here we have the tarsal claws, you can see sticking out there, and then right there this little pulvillus in the middle, and then the tarsal pads right there. So claws on the tarsi, pulvillus between them, and then tarsal pads on the tarsals. And then we have the tibia with the stridulatory spikes. We have the femur. And then, let me grab my other one here. So the point of articulation is called the coxa. And the coxa right here is going to be the one that moves and is flexible. So this articulates the leg to the body. And then you're going to have another segment here called the trochanter. This is most easily visible on the front leg. But a good rule of grasshopper legs, I was going to say thumb, but a good rule of grasshopper legs, or grasshoppers in general, is that you kind of see lots of interlocking armor plates, right? So each of these little plates is called a sclerite. And wherever a sclerite joins another sclerite, you're going to have a suture. So if you see right here, there's a suture, and every little one of these plates has a name. So if we look at the leg, we're going to be looking for sutures to identify our different segments. So we know the femur is this largest one here, and then we see a suture here and a suture here. The coxa is going to be here, and the trochanter here, and then the femur. Let me try to show you a little bit more clearly. There you go. That's a good view. So you can see the coxa, and then the trochanter here, and then the femur. And you're just looking for sutures. So the trochanter is very small. This little section right there is the trochanter. So coxa, trochanter, femur, tibia, tarsals, tarsal pads, and then claws with a pulvillus for gripping in the middle. So little walking legs, forelegs, mid legs, hind legs. And now we can get to the mouth. So this is the most important part of the grasshopper's anatomy. This is little face, and his little face is usually pretty happy. Grasshoppers live pretty good lives. And right here you're going to have a little lip you can peel up, and this is the labrum. You can see right there, and if you peel that back, you're going to see two hard crushing organs called the mandibles. So eventually what we're going to do is take all of the mouth parts out and identify them on their own. But for now, try to just lift them up in sequence so you can see them in context. We also see two palps, and you guys know that as far as insect mouth parts go, two kinds have palps, the maxilla and the labium. So you're going to have maxillary palps, which are going to be the longer ones, and then the labial palps, which are the shorter ones. Also, when we're looking at sutures, so we have a suture right here. This is going to be the frons, basically the forehead, and then you're going to have the labrum right here. And so in between the labrum and the frons, you have the clipens. So we have frons, clipens, labrum, and you have a suture here and a suture here. So the labrum is the upper lip, it holds food in the mouth. For our purposes, we'll just say that the clipens connects the labrum to the frons. What we want to do next is make a nice little display of the mouth parts like you see in your book. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to ultimately what we're going to do is to kind of take these mouth parts off layer by layer, and we'll have the labrum and then the labium are dorso-ventrally opposed, and then you have the mandibles and the maxilla that are laterally opposed. So the best way to do this, I think, let's just go ahead and take all the limbs off of our poor little grasshopper. You can use scissors or your powerful hands, whichever one you choose. Just be gentle. And what we're going to do is just decapitate our poor little grasshopper. So pull the head back a little bit and just right there, boom, done. Body, head. And here we can use this head to still see all the attributes we talked about earlier. Oops, be respectful. But then what we're going to do is essentially going to cut just straight down through this guy, and the mouth parts will kind of separate as you do that. So find the suture at the base of the clipens. So it separates the frons from the clipens, and then the labrum. So labrum, clipens, frons, so right at the suture between the frons and the clipens. And then just cut straight down perpendicular to the substrate. And what you will have is a nice little collection of mouth parts. And then it's pretty easy to separate them. So here is the labrum. We'll put the labrum, take the labrum off, put it here, and then we got a mandible that came out. So we'll find the mandible, and this one looks like it's the left mandible. So we'll put the left mandible here. So labrum here, and then the left mandible here. And then let's find the right mandible. And the mandible is going to be used for crunching foods, the hard calcified thing right in here. There's the right one. I'm not going to be too particular about orientation. And then you can kind of use the palps to trace where the maxilla and the labium are. So we're just going to take the actually, while I have this in context, you will see a little bulge right there. That is the hypopharynx, which is used for tasting and for assisting in swallowing. And so we're just going to separate the right and left maxilla from each other. There. And there. Perfect. And then we have the labium and the hypopharynx right here. So this little bit right here, little bulge right there is the hypopharynx, and then this is the labium with the palps on it. So if you have little forceps, that would be helpful too, which I do. There we go. Labium. And so now when you look at this, you should be able to identify these in the head or on the table just like this, by themselves or together. All right, let's zoom in on the mouth parts individually. Here we have the labrum, and now you can see that really obvious clipens and then the labrum right there. And this is the upper lip for holding food in. If we look at the lower lip, the labium, we're going to see, oopsie. So when we look at the labium, we're going to see the palps on either side. And then the labium can be divided into a ligula, which is kind of the flappy part at the bottom, and then a mentum, which connects the ligula to the rest of the mouth. So we have palps, we have mentum, and we have ligula. And then the mandibles look like this. You can see these hard teeth on them for crushing up the grass, and oftentimes you can actually tell the age of the grasshopper based on how worn their mandibles are, because grass has silica in it that wears down the grasshopper's mandibles. The maxilla are probably the most interesting. They have lots of different components to them. They're going to have palps on them. There we go. They're going to have palps on them, but they're also going to have two different kind of branches to them. There's going to be a galea, which is a fleshy lobe thing in the middle there, and then on top you can see kind of a spiky thing right there. That's called the lacina. So the lacina and the galea. The galea is kind of for tasting and sensing food. It's especially important in detecting toxins, so if they're eating something they shouldn't be eating. And then here the lacina is a spiky thing for mashing up food. And then it's connected to the rest of the mouth by something called a stipes, which is just at the base. So we have stipes, palp, galea, and lacina. And then the hypopharynx isn't much to look at. It's just a glob of tissue, but this is what they use to help swallow and taste their food. So those are the mouth parts. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down the ventral side of the grasshopper and then just display him open. And we don't want the scissors to go too deep in there because we want to leave all the stuff intact. And you can definitely hear the crunch of the exoskeleton as you go through. No internal skeleton, right? And we're going to go all the way to the back so we can really see everything in there. And usually these aren't really preserved very well, so we're kind of limited in what we will see. So mainly what we're interested in is going to be the digestive tract. You can use some pins to hold them open. So remember, the digestive system is basically just a tube that has distinct regions. So first of all, the pharynx, esophagus is going to be up here, and then you have this big bulge here. This is the crop, and this is going to be for food storage. And then I want to point out these weird little tubes here. So if we gently peel those back, we can see that they're not that they're connected to the digestive system, but they kind of articulate below this bulge. And so here we can see the obvious bulge in the crop, and then directly anterior to where these little tentacle things join, this is the proventriculus. These right here are the gastric ceca. So these are going to harbor symbiotic bacteria for digesting cellulose. Grasshoppers eat a lot of grass, so they're going to have very large gastric ceca. So esophagus, crop, proventriculus, gastric ceca, and then underneath, directly posterior to where the gastric ceca articulate, is going to be the ventriculus. And this is, so just think about regions here, because this is kind of a mess. So here, esophagus, here, directly in the middle of that bulge, the crop, here, right anterior to the gastric ceca, proventriculus, here, right posterior to the gastric ceca is the ventriculus. And then the intestine is going to be in this region here, and then the rectum will be at the very back. So the nutrient absorption is going to occur in the ventriculus. That's where the non-sclerotized tissue is. The foregut and the hindgut are covered in cuticle to prevent water loss. So nutrient absorption has to occur in the ventriculus intestine area. You can point out the tracheal system. You can kind of see little thin strands going throughout. That's going to be the tracheal system. And at the back, in some specimens, you can see even finer spaghetti noodle stuff. This is the Malpighian tubules, which helps in regulating ion concentrations. And that's pretty much it for the inside. Crop, proventriculus, gastric ceca, ventriculus, rectum. I won't ask you about Malpighian tubules or a tracheal system, though, because those are difficult to point to. So mainly just the majority of the digestive system.